Howdy, lieutenants and economists.
The most volatile, evil, disgusting things on the planet, humans. If you have a video request, you can always go to assholeconsulting.com.
Yeah, I am gonna charge you, kids. And that is the importance of not fucking up.
You are such an asshole!
Hey everybody, the old captain here. I had to actually economics today. Well, it wasn't today, it was over the course of several days. And then I had to do springtime cleaning and clean the house and all this other crap that builds up. But finally got to this and actually had to do some research, which is, it's just like, damn it, it gotta work. I can't just spew common sense and have you pay me, I gotta think now. So Zach paid me to think, and Zach writes, please find the attached two articles I received from a Goldman Sachs staffer in 2008. The average price per gallon in July of 2008 reached $4.11, $4.66 in current dollars with the consumer price index. With the inflation adjustment, that means prices a decade ago were 2/3 higher than they are now, according to AAA. The current average price per gallon is about $2.80. The attachment is a discussion of the super spike by Arjun Murthy. Please review it, and it is about 20 pages long. Do you know of any such concern in the next few years? Do you give any credence to the discussion of pink oil? This is for YouTube publication. Please let me know your price. So, Captain dusted off his economist hat and read through the research and the report put out by Goldman Sachs. And I went online. I'm like, okay, all right, fine. I'm going to look into what this peak oil thing is. And I found out, for all the discussion, it's an incredibly simple concept. I don't know why it garners so much discussion. It's like, do you know water is red? It's like, yeah, it's kind of a, like, ooh, conspiracy, aluminum, peak oil. And it's like, yeah, resources run out. If there's finite resources, you will run out. But you see, and this is, if you research it, it's kind of funny. Because you have these kind of faux TED Talk intellectuals. It's not about depletion. You see, it's about production. Like, oh, it's not about your heart stop beating. It's about death. It's like this splitting of hairs. So let's talk about what the super spike was in peak oil, and then I'll go on to address the client's question. We'll do peak oil first because that makes more sense. All right, here's a shocker, guys. If there's a limited supply of something on this planet and we mine it, somewhere along the infinite time frame, there'll be a starting of the production, a peak level of production, and then it tapers off because it's running out. That's it. That's peak oil or peak anything. Peak diamonds. There's a finite amount of diamonds in the planet. And some are easily accessible. Okay, we'll increase diamond mining technology. Okay, we're going to do, we found out. But inevitably comes the point in time, somewhere across the timeline of infinity, we mine the most carats of diamonds, and then it tapered off from there on out. This was such it was a letdown. This is one of those things where I'm like, really? Want to talk about normies, conformies, and inferiors? This is the fucking shit right here. So I'm surprised that peak oil is such a thing. Anyway, larger point is, yes, there's a finite amount of oil in the planet, in the world. And yes, production has gone like this, depending on technologies. But in general, there will be a well-distribution curve of production where at some point in time, maybe not today, maybe not in the past, but sometime in the future likely, there will be a peak that will produce the most amount of oil at some point in time, 1 year, and then it will continue to drop down. It may drop down like this, but we will never produce as much oil, and that's the peak. Get it? Peak oil. Oh my God. So, long-term looking, what they're saying is, there's a finite amount, so we better develop renewable energy like solar, wind, nuclear. We can't do that. Bad for the environment. How? We can use a little bit of nuclear waste that we put very safely away. France has been doing it for a long time, but it's very bad. So, anyway, that's peak oil. That's it. And how this plays out in economics is that if we hit the peak and production starts its inevitable downward trend, but the world economy, not population necessarily, but economy, world consumption of oil continues to go up like that, well, the price of oil is going to go up because of supply and demand disparities. But soon they're going to say, we're not going to be able to consume what isn't there. See, like if this is the most amount of production and it starts going down and we want our economies to keep growing, that gap, you can't squeeze more oil out than what's being squeezed out already. That gap has to be filled in with some kind of alternative energy. So this is the push towards renewable energies. Now, the super spike, we have to go back in time. None of you millennials will get that joke. We go back in time 10 years, basically. And Goldman Sachs came out with this report that my client sent me. And this was this very thorough analysis of the oil markets. And they had this thing called the super spike. And what was happening at the time, we had not fallen into the Great Recession yet. We're going into it. But up until that point, we had a booming economy. Global GDP was booming as well. China is booming. Everybody's booming. It's like, oh, there's a little bit of recession. There's a little bit of problem with the housing and financial markets. And peak oil and renewable energies was already known at this time. It wasn't a secret. And the problems of supply and demand that present in the future was that. And I think maybe some of you are old enough to remember, like 2004, 2005, the price of gas was very high. This is how I got into motorcycle riding. I'm like, I can't afford the gas anymore. I got to get a motorcycle. God bless America, I got a motorcycle. So you started feeling this pain where demand was starting to outstrip supply. And not only because the global economy was booming, but the OPEC and other oil-producing nations of the world were starting to plateau. And you can't even say plateau, certainly plateau, but we're not able to keep up with demand. And also reserves. I don't know if you ever follow gas or oil news, but it's like, how much is in reserves? Because if all of a sudden, I don't know, there's a sharp jump up for the demand of oil and there's not enough reserves, well then the price of oil goes skyrocketing. And the price of oil was starting to get into this zone where oil economists and analysts at Goldman Sachs says we might be hitting the super spike. And that was their theory, is basically the concept of peak oil coming to fruition, where all of a sudden now production is going to outpace, or demand is going to outpace whatever possible feasible supply there might be for oil. And you could even say to some extent it did come true, because you can look at the spike, and the spike is as dramatic as the spike in the oil embargo put back in 1973, if you want to go back to prehistoric times, when dinosaurs roamed the earth. Who was in there? Ford? No, it wasn't Ford. Was that Nixon in 73? I'd have to look it up again. Anyway, so, and you read through the report, it's very well put together, and they talk about what I was most impressed with was their sane and unemotional and practical analysis about how to go and deal with gas. And they're talking about, we know that you like to blame big oil, but they don't really supply that much. They refine. I know you'd like to blame speculators. That was the thing you guys have already forgotten about. Oh, it's speculators. And they made a very interesting argument where it's like, good, let them drive it up, because one of the solutions to peak oil is that it has to become so costly that people say, I can't afford it. And then they change their behaviors. Perfect, again, micro example of what I did is I changed my behaviors rather dramatically. I went from a car, although I still had a car, to driving a motorcycle. And you can say, well, how is that dramatic? Well, I really increased my risk of getting screwed up, in a car accident and death. Definitely changed my lifestyle. But that's and you guys all think the old Captain's an evil, white male Republican kitty kicker. But I actually do somewhat care about the environment. It, not as much as most, but I don't like spending money I don't have to. So I changed my behaviors, and it's kind of a saying that was going along. The solution to high oil prices is high oil prices. It will change people's behaviors. So this was this precipice we were about to happen. Now, two things happened, though. Interestingly timed enough, that the super spike ended, or never came to fruition, and peak oil had been kicked down the road. That can have been kicked down the road. One was the global recession. This report came out in May of 2008, and GDP growth was contracting, but not as severely as it did in 2009. And that shit tanked. that tanked. If you want to read about it, you want to read again about the when dinosaurs roamed the earth, you can read my very first book, Behind the Housing Crash, which I think is celebrating its 10th year anniversary coming up. Anyway, so global, not just the U.S. economy, global GDP just collapsed. So demand for oil dropped, and so we didn't. You had now demand for oil was more than adequately met by supply. Well, then there's this other thing called fracking technology that came along, and it came online. And what had ended up happening is fracking. The technology had been around since the 90s, but it hadn't been perfected. And it started in about 2006 once they started discovering shale deposits out in the Dakotas in the American West and Canadian West. And they said, hey, we can make some money here. Now, it's kind of an interesting confluence of multiple storms forming to create the superstorm. Prices were getting so high that people are like, wait, a barrel of oil we can get $140 for? Well, for when oil was what? God, it was dirt cheap in the aughts. The late 90s and the aughts, it was just dirt cheap. I remember paying like 89 cents a gallon. Which translates, I don't know what but let's say it was $25 or $30 per barrel of oil. Well, you look at that, like, well, I'm not going to invest money to set up an oil rig and drill a hole and get permits and fight off environmentalists and hear, whatever complaints or drill a road and all that. For to get 1 barrel of oil, I can only sell it for $25. Well, forget it. Well, if it goes up by 600%, now this thing is worth 6 times more or 5 times more than what it was before. You're like, wait, I get 5 times the amount? Well, that changes the finances and the mathematics of the profitability of different types of not only drilling technology, making fracking profitable, but other oil drilling technologies, other oil fields become profitable as well. So whereas, say offshore drilling, obviously that's more expensive than onshore drilling. Well, now that becomes more profitable. And now fracking becomes profitable. So in an odd sense, the solution to high oil prices was high oil prices, but not because it changed human behavior, although it did a little bit. We obviously have more fuel-efficient cars. But now it made new or previously old drilling technologies profitable once again, or old oil wells that had been capped off because it was just the heavy oil that was down. It was very expensive to come in and refine. Now all of a sudden, all these other venues to different types of oil became profitable once again, or for the first time. And that's what triggered the fracking boom. So also people are like, yeah, we'll put hey, farmer, have any of you driven through South or North Dakota? Not a lot there. Land's kind of cheap, or it was. Hey, Farmer Joe, we need a piece of land about yay like yay, And I've been on actual oil rigs. I had a buddy who worked on one, and they were cool. It was really cool to go visit them. I got to go in the tower and look at all the equipment. And you're talking, it wasn't that big. The man camps were the guys, the housing quarters for the men that ran the oil rig, because women complain about the wage gap. I didn't see one woman on those oil rigs. Interesting. The man camp took up more surface area than the actual oil rig did. But the oil rig, I don't know, with the tanks and the thing for the natural gas, you're looking, 100 yards by 100 yards, maybe? About the size of a football field, maybe even smaller. Somewhere around there. So for what is a really small piece of land, Farmer Joe sells it off. Yeah, or he leases it, doesn't even sell it, leases it as long as you cap it back off. And people are like, yeah, this is very cheap. We can pull profit using fracking technology out of this otherwise unused land in the middle of freaking nowhere, North Dakota. And so all of a sudden, U.S. oil production, you look at the chart, we peaked in about 72, 73, and then we started tapering off. All of a sudden, there's this spike now in the late aughts to, peaked around 2014 or so. we're producing more oil than we ever had before because of this fracking technology. So this then, to be intellectually honest, people are like, oh, look, see, everyone's, we're going to run out of oil, da-da-da-da-da. It's like, okay, well, yeah, but it's a new technology. Again, there is a finite amount of oil in the ground. There's a finite amount of diamonds. There's a finite amount of lovable claries on this planet. And there will be a peak oil. All this did was kick the can down the road. This just bought us more time until the inevitable point in time that we will run out of oil. Or I'm sorry, as all you like peak oil people like to point out, it's not depletion, it's a decrease. It's like, okay, thank you. The peak, I got it. Okay, got it. So please review it as about 20. Do you know of any such concerns in the next few years? No, because this technology, fracking, I had to go do a little bit more research. Once you have this new technology of fracking, how many more years of reserves does this add to the global supply versus consumption of oil? And it depends, but roughly they say conservative estimates. Fracking now, there's 5 trillion barrels of oil in the earth based on fracking, the shale reserves. How much of that is recoverable? I couldn't find any like hard and concrete. The only one I saw was like around 1 trillion, maybe a little bit more. We consume 35 billion barrels of oil a year globally. So simple math would say roughly this adds another 30 years. All right. So we're not worried about peak oil in the next 30 years. I happen to believe strongly in mankind. I happen to believe strongly in capitalism and the human spirit. And I believe that fracking technologies not only will but already have improved, and I think more than 1 trillion, assuming these estimates are correct, will be recoverable. And so, I mean, if you want to say all 5 trillion, well, that's 150 years, so now we're really down far the road, and you and I will be long dead by that time. So in the next few years, no, I don't see it. And you can kind of see it in oil prices right now. I forgot what we are at. I think we're at $75, $76 per barrel. I looked more at the price of gas. We're at $2.60, $2.70 gallon of gas. And what has happened with fracking technology is essentially put a cap and a limit on short to mid-term oil and gas prices. If it gets too expensive, OPEC decides to get lippy, and we give it back by fucking hand. The price goes up, all of a sudden it's almost mechanical, where if it hits 80, now these strings of fracking rigs that were shut down, I've seen them. You just flip on a couple switches. Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but you just flip on some switches and you start pumping again. And you can see there's a really cool map I saw one time, this is years ago, and it showed you the wells and what the profitability was based on the barrel of oil. Some are profitable at 60, 70, 80, 90. You want to play this game all day, Saudi Arabia? We can play. So there's like this going to be inevitable cap where if it gets too expensive, fine, we'll kick in some more. Fine, we'll kick in some more. The world economy would have to grow so much and so fast to push through whatever shale production could not keep up with and not match, that I don't see a peak oil or another super spike coming along anytime soon. Also, there is, don't discount that Americans especially Americans and other countries, have become more efficient with the use of oil. And then I know this is just a dream I have, but it might come to fruition once the old guard of baby boomer bosses die out. I don't know if you're working if I can't see you. I don't understand this Excel thing. I'll let you kids do it. Oh, I don't like this. Oh, you kids and your computers and your internet. In our day, we chiseled on rock and we hung out with Fred and Barney. I do believe within our lifetimes, you're going to see basically certainly the Gen Zers, but as the millennials and my generation, Gen X, as my generation is becoming management now. once these baby boomers are dethroned from the world of employment and corporate leadership, there's going to be hopefully a huge push to start telecommuting. And more than fracking itself, I believe once we start saying, look, commuting is dumb. It is really dumb. And if you want to read about how much I hate commuting and the horrible cost it has to society, psychologically, financially, environmentally, read Bachelor Pad Economics and read, not Reconnaissance Man, Poor Richard's Retirement. But what I think is going to happen is a cultural shift, generational shift amongst behaviors in employment that is going to really cut into gas and oil production. Where people are going to think, no, I'm going to work from home. And that is going to really cut into and start capping off demand for oil. Because there's just no reason for it. There's no godly reason to make the sheep line up like cattle sheep, on our highways and blow, Lord, I mean, California, could you imagine California without traffic? The liberal Democrats can't because they need you guys just to go and drive more and more. We don't know if you're working. How do I know if I can't see you working? Again, once that bottleneck of baby boomer bosses is removed from society, I think we're going to see less and less commutes, less and less traffic. Could you imagine a world without traffic jams? And thus a drastic reduction in the consumption of oil. And then that'll kick the production of peak oil and whatever the peak, that's going to kick it down the road. It could even be 200 years from now. You never know, because hey, if we're all working from home, and then you could even say self-driving cars. Hey, I'm going to hop in. Why would you buy a car anymore? I'm going to hop in this car. It's going to take me to California. Somebody hops in. There's not going to be any empty loads going back and forth. So I do believe technology, again, not government policy, just industrialist, capitalist, innovation, creativity, Western civilization for the win. We will make it so that we would almost, I wouldn't say obsolete oil, but kind of akin to like paper. We got email, we do scanning, right? That wasn't a government program or policy. That was email. That was, don't tell me DARPA and the internet and the military. I know, all right? But we consume a lot less paper. It would be, and I think telecommuting will be a game changer with the consumption of oil, once again kicking it down the road. So no, in the next few years, I don't see another super spike. I mean, there could be a war or something out of left field that we're not expecting. If there was a war and it was in the Middle East and China was going to nuke things, and geez, then everything's going to go up in price. But everything ceteris paribus, no, I don't see another super spike. Because it's just, we have excess capacity. Demand is being tapered. I'm praying to God we don't have to commute. Praying for that. Who knew that peak oil would be solved because the baby boomers finally died off and got the hell out of the reins of power. So that's it. Maybe I'll title this "Baby Boomers: How Baby Boomers Will Cause Peak Oil." I don't know. We'll figure it out. So that's it. Yeah, I don't think. So I mean, and then do you give any credence to the discussion of peak oil? Yes. I mean, it's not philosophical. It's true. But right now, especially with the advances in technology, and hopefully, we spend or we consume less. I think it's not going to be something you and I got to worry about in our lifetimes, and that's all I care about. Oh, do you care about future? No, I'll be dead. Why would I? But what about the children? When you environmentalists stop flying around like Leonardo DiCaprio, having large houses like what's his name, Al Gore, and you start conserving like I do, well then I'll believe you guys care about the environment. But in the meantime, you drive your little Range Rover SUVs and fly across the Atlantic to give speeches. That can be done over the internet, by the way. I didn't know if you knew that or not. All right, that's it. You guys got questions? Captain's got answers at assholeconsulting.com. Check out the new website coming soon. olderbrother.com, along with the Older Brother podcast. We also have the Clary podcast. Both will be on the same SoundCloud RSS feed. We have my books at Amazon.com. We have a Patreon.com/Aaron Clary. And there's something else I do with which it escapes me now. We'll see you guys later. Toodles.